Home birth is basically where you decide to give birth at home instead of in a hospital. Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. Today we are going to just dive right in and talk a little bit about home birth, since that's something that I will be sharing a lot more about in the coming weeks, especially since I plan on vlogging my entire home birth this time around if everything goes to plan. We all know that birth isn't always predictable, but that's the goal. And so I wanted to just start off today by talking about what is home birth and why do women choose to have them. And so to dive right in, home birth is basically where you decide to give birth at home instead of in a hospital. You could also consider giving birth in a birth center, a home birth, but for the sake of keeping things pretty straightforward, a home birth is exactly what it sounds like. You give birth at home. I actually gave birth to my first son right here in this bedroom. And I plan to do the same thing for baby number 2 that is due in, oh my gosh, 7 weeks. We are getting close. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and start to address some things about home birth. So home birth can look a little bit different for everybody. Home birth you can give birth in a pool if you set it up and have a water birth at home. That's what I did with my first son. I had a pool set up to my left, so you're right, to the right here. And he was born in the pool, and then shortly after I got out and I got cozy into bed, and that is where I birthed the placenta and where my husband cut the cord and all the good things. And then me and my son did not get back out of bed until we absolutely had to, which wasn't until the next day. And so, but some women don't want the complication of a pool and getting wet. And even though there's many reasons why you would want to do a pool, sometimes some women just will give birth in bed. Sometimes your birth might go too fast, and while you're setting up the birth pool, baby has other plans and they come much sooner. I have experienced that one as a birth photographer. And so it can look a little bit different for everybody. So you can have a birth in a pool, you can birth in your bed. I've seen stories where women give birth on their bathroom floor, in the shower. All births that, if you were planning a home birth, are 100% in the general direction of the way you wanted things to go. And so for my second birth, I do plan to still set up a birth pool. I don't plan to get in it as soon as I did with my son. I think that slowed my labor down a lot. It helped a lot with my comfort levels, but I got in the pool right as soon as contractions started getting pretty painful and 3 minutes apart. And then it stayed like that for 17 hours. And so I was in the pool a majority of that time. And so, yeah, so home birth can definitely look different for everybody. Some people decide to have a doula there. Some people decide to have a birth photographer there. Some people decide to have both. Some people, there is another subgroup of home birth called free birth, where you don't have a midwife at all present. And that's a whole other kind of topic that I don't really plan to touch on, because I personally would not do a free birth unless I was in a situation. I don't know if I would ever do one, actually. I would have to really think about it. Just because I do love the comfort and care of a midwife and having someone there who knows more than I do. I know the biggest thing about home birth is women know their own bodies, but I'm also not a medical professional, and I don't know when to call it when something is looking concerning. So every time I get my blood pressure checked, she gives me a number, and she says this is your blood pressure, and then I sit there kind of eagerly waiting for her to go, yeah, it's good. So I don't know what the blood pressure numbers mean or anything like that. So I feel most comfortable with a midwife there. Um, Personally, for my first birth, I did not have a photographer or a doula. This time around, I am having a photographer there. I personally don't feel the need to have a doula because I feel like my husband is extremely supportive. And since I'm training to be a doula myself, I also know a lot of the helpful things that doulas can provide, um, that I can do for myself and prepare myself with. I have a lot of that knowledge, and so um, since there's already going to be so many people, my midwife, not as many people necessarily as in a hospital room, but my midwife, she usually has two students come. She's a wonderful teaching midwife. And so she said there will be one or two students. My husband, of course, and then my birth photographer. And so I just didn't feel the need for a doula, but I will make another video as to why doulas are so important. I'll touch on it a little bit in this video, but I can go on about that, especially since I myself am training to be a doula. And so I'll just kind of briefly touch on why you might want to consider one, whether you're birthing at home or in a hospital, especially a hospital, personally, I think. So, anyways, moving on. Um, let's talk about briefly the difference between a certified professional midwife and a certified nurse midwife. Typically, when you hire a private midwife yourself to attend your home birth, they are going to be a certified professional midwife. This is different from a certified nurse midwife. A certified nurse midwife does have more medical background training. And so they're usually hired by hospitals. So that's why when you go see your OBGYN office, usually there's like 4 OBGYNs that work there, and then they have like a midwife. That is usually a certified nurse midwife that they have there, and that is a midwife that could potentially be on call for your hospital birth. And I think you would be in great hands with a certified nurse midwife, but they don't typically, I say typically, attend home births. Usually they stay more in the medical field. So a lot of women honestly prefer a certified professional midwife because they are trying to, when they do a home birth, they're trying to get out of the medicalized system. A certified professional midwife still goes through rigorous training. They have to do apprenticeships under other midwives. They have to attend like over 100 births in their schooling. I won't talk a ton about it because I've personally never been through it. And so I don't want to create a narrative of what it is to become a certified professional midwife, more than just what I kind of know off the top of my head. I do know, like my last midwife is a certified professional midwife. My current midwife is a certified professional midwife. They can still administer oxygen to baby if needed. They can give you Pitocin if you are hemorrhaging. They can stitch you up. They can carry a lot of first aid supplies that you would need in a birth. And so you're still in really great hands. You are still being taken care of by someone who knows something about when it's an emergency and when it shouldn't be, when it isn't. So they have a little bit of a medical background, just not a full-on like bachelor's degree in nursing. Typically, some of them will get a bachelor's degree in nursing and then realize they don't want to be a nurse and realize they want to be a midwife. And so then on top of that, they'll go through midwife training and they'll still do home births, but those are a little more rare. So now that we've touched on that, that is the difference between a certified professional midwife and a certified nurse midwife. What else is a good thing to talk about when it comes to home birth? Why women have home births? That's a great one to go with. A lot of women have home births because they want something more chill than a hospital. They want something more calming. They know they want to do an unmedicated birth and they don't want to get pressured into inductions or monitoring that's not needed, or cervical checks, or an epidural, or um, internal fetal monitoring, like all of the things that take place in a hospital setting when you're giving birth. A lot of women like to avoid that. And that's kind of the reason I went with a home birth. I was just feeling not confident in my OB. With my son, I was seeing an OB for the first 16 weeks and I did not feel like I was being cared for. I didn't feel like I was being treated like a person. I just felt like it was in and out, and I didn't feel like the person that I was supposed to trust my life with while I was giving birth was actually having my best interest in mind. And so I decided to hire a midwife and do a home birth because I knew I wanted to go unmedicated. And I did not want to be pressured. Everyone's like, oh, just you wait until you're like 5 centimeters. You'll be screaming for that epidural. Was I in pain at 5 centimeters? Was I tired at 5 centimeters? Was I ready to cave and go to the hospital at 5 centimeters? Yes, because I had been stuck there for a very long time. But the wonderful thing about me giving birth at home is I had such a beautiful support system that knew my goals, especially my husband. And we worked together to get me through that rut I was in. And within 2 hours, my water broke and I dilated more. That leads me to my next point. I feel like when you're in a hospital, your partner doesn't get to be as big of a part. They're kind of just standing off to the side. They don't really know what to do. And it's just kind of uncomfortable in a hospital setting. You're not really in your element. And so I wanted my husband to be an integral part of my birth. Um, so because it's his birth too. I'm pushing the baby out, but it's his kid. It's his experience. He made half the kid. So, and that's exactly what happened. He was so wonderful. When I went into labor and we were like, okay, this is happening. He was getting me the drinks I needed. He was filling up the pool. He was massaging my lower back. He was putting my hair up for me. He was talking to me and telling me all the things that I wanted to hear when I was contracting. And then when things were getting really intense, like I was leaning on him and squeezing the heck out of his hand. And we got in the shower together when I was feeling really discouraged to just have a moment by ourselves. And then afterwards, like he was right there when I pulled baby up myself with a little help from my midwife because he was being a little stubborn about coming out. Um, but he was right there and got to be like up in my space as much as I was in my own space. And maybe that's not everybody's cup of tea, but that is mine because I wanted him to experience the birth just as much as I was. I didn't want him to feel like he was getting in anybody's way and overstepping in any way, which I feel like a lot of dads feel that way in a hospital. They don't want to bump into the nurses or overstep or do anything that they're not touch anything that they're not supposed to touch or anything like that. So that was a huge reason I did. I know that's a big reason a lot of other moms do as well. A lot of women switch to a midwifery standard of care for their second, third, fourth, and so on babies after having a baby in the hospital, usually because their hospital experience was subpar. Whether that be where they feel actually traumatized from their hospital experience and like they were abused in one way or another, or whether they just feel like, my hospital birth was okay. Wasn't the worst thing in the world, but I totally could have done this at home and I would have been way comfier at home. And so, usually, a lot of times, women will obviously have their first birth in the hospital because that's what we do in America. And then they'll realize that they're like, oh, no, I want to do this at home next time. I decided for my first birth to do it for those other reasons I listed previously, but also like hearing stories of other women who have been coerced into things they didn't want to do or abused in ways by the hospital system here. Um, that on top of my own experience with my OB, like I didn't, there was no reason I should have thought that they were lying about their experience or exaggerating because even just in my prenatal appointments, um, my wishes weren't really being listened to. Like I told them I wanted to have an unmedicated birth and I wanted to be as natural as possible. And they were like, okay, and so like we're gonna schedule you for an induction at 39 weeks. Why? That's not what I want. So yeah, it just a lot of women just don't get listened to, and it's unfortunate. Um, so those are some reasons why women would want to choose a home birth over a hospital birth. And I'm sure I'm missing some, but those are the big ones that come to mind. And so I'm sure you guys are all wondering right now, is home birth safe? Generally, yes. There haven't been a ton of studies. I will link a study. I'm hoping that there's enough space here next to my head where I can be like, hey, right here. But I will put a study on screen that has been done that does show, it is a peer reviewed study that does show really great outcomes for home birth compared to birth in a hospital with an OB. We really haven't done a ton of research because it's just nobody's wanted to, and nobody's had the opportunity to. You have to jump through a lot of hoops to get a peer reviewed study published. And there is a lot of back and forth and controversy over home birth because we don't want women birthing at home outside of the system, making hospitals money. Why would we want that? And so there's not a lot of the information you're going to need to take in to determine whether you feel safe having a home birth is other women's experiences. Other women's experiences, as well as how much do you trust your midwife? Ask your midwife all the questions that you feel you have, all the fears that you have. I ask questions like, when do you know it's time to go to the hospital? When do you call it? What do you do if there is an emergency? So when I got answers like, my midwife will call it at a yellow flag if things even remotely look concerning, we kind of start to make a game plan for either calling 911 or getting to the hospital if it's not as urgent, but just going downhill. Midwives listen to baby with a monitor, usually every 30 minutes to an hour. They check your blood pressure every 30 minutes to an hour. They check your pulse every 30 minutes to an hour, just to make sure that everything's looking normal. If I were to bleed out, that was another question. If I were to start hemorrhaging, what would you do? Of course, they would call 911 or get us en route to the hospital, but they also carry medications that would help slow the bleeding or stop the bleeding until we can get to a hospital. And so that made me feel a lot better as well. But overall, these worst case scenarios don't happen very often. It's very rare because you're not having any kind of intervention. Typically, birth without intervention, and if you're low risk, does not go wrong. Typically. Obviously, there's risks with anything. There's risks with getting in the car and driving down the street. Typically, you're not going to get T-boned by somebody. Can it happen? Yes. Typically, no. So in that case, I would say home birth is safe. I'm not a medical professional. This is not a medical opinion. This is my personal opinion. And so just listen to other women's stories. Try to look up how many deaths from home birth happen each year. Because I'm sure if you did look up something, there would be articles. Woman died giving birth at home. How silly is she? You know, that's how I feel like a lot of people view it, is like, if you give birth at home, you're so silly because you could die. Why would you ever do that? If you give birth at home, you're asking for it. There's a lot of negative opinions about home birth. And so I would say, if you want to feel confident about your decision on whether or not a home birth is safe, talk to your midwife. Make sure you pick a midwife that you feel confident in, and talk to other women. And I will link the study that I did find. This study was conducted in the UK. They do have more positive maternal mortality rates than we do here in the United States, but also women have midwives more over there and have home births more over in the UK. So I wonder why they have better maternal mortality rates, if you catch my drift. And so in America, less than 1% of births are home births, and we have one of the worst maternal mortality rates of all the developed countries. We have the highest C-section rates. We have the highest induction rates. C-sections, off the top of my head, I will link things, but off the top of my head, I believe C-sections are sitting at 34% of women have a C-section, and somewhere around 50 to 55% of women are induced. It might even be higher than that. I think it's higher than that for inductions. And so, yeah, is home birth safe? Well, is birth in a hospital safe? Clearly not super safe in America compared to other countries. So to wrap this up, because it's starting to become kind of a long video. Why what is home birth? Home birth is where you give birth at home, in the comfort of your home, cozy. You don't have people bothering you. You don't have people pressuring you for anything. And you don't have people coming in and waking you up, telling you you can't nap with your baby, telling you anything. Um, you just do your own thing. And so, why do women have home births? Because that's exactly what they want, or they are trying to escape something else in the more medicalized system. Um, so yeah, thank you guys for. I feel like this is my first like longer video where I'm really talking about something I'm passionate about. So if you've stuck around this long in the video, thank you. I really hope to dive more into each of the topics that I kind of touched on and talk a little bit more about the deeper things in home birth, like um, what I would do differently. I have an idea. I have ideas, like why you should hire a doula, what I'm doing differently for this home birth than I did for my last one, and how do you know if home birth is right for you? All of these things, but with due time, we are going to keep this somewhat short so that you can get back to chasing around your little ones. Thank you guys again for watching this far and just listening to what I have to say, and we'll see you next week.